Hello, everyone. This is Colleen Milton, and on behalf of Pivot 3 and 451 Research, I would like to welcome you and say thanks for attending today's webcast titled How to Simplify Life in a Hybrid Cloud World. Leading off the discussion today will be Carl Brooks, who is Analyst Service Providers at 451 Research. Following Carl will be Ben Bowles, who is VP of Products at Pivot 3. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. To ask a question, simply type it in the question box on your screen below. We will answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A session, and we'll respond to all unanswered questions via email after the webcast concludes. This presentation and slides are available for download. And finally, please provide feedback at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carl.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carl Brooks. I'm an analyst with 451 Research, and my area of coverage is service providers, cloud technology, and cloud platforms. Today we're here to talk about something that is on the minds of lots of people these days, and that is hybrid cloud and interoperability with across various platforms. Now, we're going to start with a little bit of background. When the advent of cloud computing as a model came around, it was fairly clear fairly quickly that there was going to be some level of interoperability between existing on-premise data centers and IT infrastructure, including legacy infrastructure, as well as this newfangled kind of consumption model. And we decided to come up with a formal definition and a architectural model for hybrid cloud to describe all of the different moving parts that would compose what would make a accurate and more or less watertight definition of hybrid cloud to distinguish it from, say, just using more than one cloud provider at a time, or just using two types of IT infrastructure environments at the same time in different locations. So with that said, our formal definition is this. It's two or more distinct cloud infrastructures that actively interoperate to deliver seamless business functions. In English, that's using more than one cloud platform to run a single application, or more than one applications using them together jointly under the hood. It has to be within the cloud model. It has to be automated, programmatically accessible with APIs, elastic, on-demand, self-service. It has to work more or less the way Amazon Web Services work. Most of the folks on this call will be familiar with how that operates. It crosses all kinds of boundaries. It's public cloud, private cloud, where you run something that works like AWS on your own data center. Hosted private cloud or hosted public cloud, which is something that works more or less like AWS but is not AWS. It's hosted by another provider. It can be geographically and feature dispersed environments, meaning it can be in many different locations. Different environments can do different things. But what really defines a hybrid cloud experience, a hybrid cloud environment, is that you have a single management plane for controls, access, security across these heterogeneous platforms, and that these multiple platforms and services deliver unitary applications that if you look at the surface of them, you wouldn't know or you wouldn't care, possibly, that they consume more than one location-independent cloud environment. It's a pretty simple concept. If you look at the diagram we have there, that's our snapshot architecture diagram. Data and applications at the top, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud in the middle being the unifying factor. This is kind of the ideal state. Now, when we were doing this work, we also came up with an architectural diagram that tried to encompass all of the different moving parts, which looks something like this. I'm not going to bother reading through all of it, but we tried to be as comprehensive as we could. We went all the way from the edge. You'll see there's LP-WAN, VPN, satellite, all the way down through all of the different moving parts and moving components and all of the different things you'd need to comprise every possible aspect of enterprise IT to create these kind of hybrid cloud applications and stacks. Now, so this is a great slide if you really like complexity and all that sort of thing, but that's not really what we're talking about today, because the market has really moved on from when we designed this slide in terms of what's available and what's accessible. It's actually gotten quite a bit easier to do hybrid cloud in various fashions. Many of the commercial vendors, such as VMware, have hybrid cloud integration baked in right now. It's relatively easy to marry together cloud environments across open source projects like OpenStack and then across environments like AWS and Azure. So this slide, while entertaining and interesting, is not what we're here to discuss. Instead, what I'm going to discuss is the impact and the ongoing role of hybrid cloud in the market today. So overall, where we are today with hybrid cloud is that 90% of the enterprises that we survey, and we collect an awful lot of buy-side research. We have something like 50,000 different enterprise IT buyers within our survey network that we survey on a regular basis. 90% of them have some sort of multiple cloud environments today. Usually that's SaaS. It also includes AWS. It includes Azure. It includes these hosted private cloud providers we talk about, and it's across all these different models, and it also includes private cloud that the enterprises run themselves. 90%, most of them, SaaS accounts for most of that, honestly. However, we know that because of this multi-cloud model, because enterprises have adopted so many of these different practices, is that they want to get to hybrid cloud at the end of the day. They want to have a single seamless way to manage all of the inputs, all of the data that they have, all of the applications, and they want to go across all of those different environments. If they haven't done so, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they haven't had the time or the organization, or they're lacking the tools to do it. The other thing we know about this is thoroughly mainstream. Every industry vertical, every workload is a candidate. Some stand out. I mean, there's some obvious use cases for hybrid cloud where you have regulated data on one side and a web front end on the other. It can make some things easier. And we also know that interoperability from providers and vendors is high. Its tools for hybrid cloud are proliferating. Hybrid cloud is getting easier and easier. When we talk to enterprises about the adoption that they have today, it becomes very clear that if they haven't done it already, they're thinking about it, they're planning for it, because it really makes sense. The overall impact in the market that we see, the thing that we use to verify this supposition and to verify the survey data that comes out, is we collect revenue data from various sources, providers, also from vendors. We have a category that we call cloud enabling technologies. This is all the tools that you use to manage public and private clouds, orchestration, management, cost optimization, monitoring, you name it. And we also collect revenue from the cloud providers themselves, so we know how much money is being spent on infrastructure that comes in the cloud fashion. Again, Amazon, AWS, Google, IBM, the raft of smaller providers that offer cloud services. And when we look at these two metrics together, we see that they're almost equal. We see that enterprises are spending almost about the same amount of money, which is a considerable amount of money. It's going to be more than $60 billion in 2018, and it's only rising sharply. We see they spend about the same amount of money on the tools as they do on the infrastructure. And so we know that these tools are as important as the infrastructure itself. It's fine to say you can turn on a virtual machine and you can consume virtual storage and you can do it remotely. It quickly uses its utility and devolves back into infrastructure headaches without these tools, without these specialized software platforms that are used to manage that infrastructure and to make it more seamless and make it more streamlined. And a great deal of that spending in cloud enabling technologies is around management and orchestration. It's around coordinating across various platforms and various clouds. If you look across any of the popular, say, cost optimization tools out there today, like Cloud Checker, you'll see that you can roll multiple cloud endpoints into it and analyze them together. It's not just AWS. So it's essentially a mainstream part of the trend of cloud consumption is to be able to consume and manage multiple clouds at once from these tool sets. However, that doesn't always get you all the way to hybrid cloud. What that gets you is a sort of mishmash of management and operations, and it does, still requires some affirmative work to get from there to hybrid cloud.
And this brings us to our first poll question for today, which will show up on your screen, so please go ahead and put in your answer. How are you using public clouds for offsite backup, disaster recovery, on-prem augmentation of storage and compute resources, workload migration, flex capacity, or other/none?
So that's a question we actually ask quite often in our survey research, and we get a range of answers back. But reliably, DR, external storage, data protection, that tops the list, but you also see all sorts of uses for public cloud. We're all quite familiar with things like social. Streaming media is huge. Some of the earliest adopters for public cloud use, and actually some of the early adopters for hybrid cloud use at this point are media companies, ad companies, streaming media, live event streaming, for instance, where you've got data that's coming in, digital video that's being processed at a sports stadium, for instance, has to go up to a public cloud and then get distributed globally. It's all over the place. But the utility and the access of a public cloud are really undeniable. It's just a question of weighing the benefits, weighing the costs, seeing what makes the most sense. All right, so shall we move on from there? Yeah, so here's a little bit of a deeper dive into how enterprises are currently comprising the market for hybrid or multi-cloud. This is one of the questions that comes out of our standard polling. Which of the following best describes your hybrid or multi-cloud strategy? And the answers are quite varied, but you see at the top, not a majority, but most enterprises say we dynamically move workloads to the most appropriate IT environment based on cost, performance, security, data sovereignty, other requirements. Most enterprises consider they do already have a handle on using different cloud environments appropriately, based on either cost or security or whatever the major driver is. You pick the environment that gives you the best return. Most of the respondents say that they have a pretty good idea of doing that. But it devolves from there. It's we use on-premise resources mainly for existing workloads, but new workloads use IaaS, public cloud, or hosted clouds. This is greenfield development, and this is kind of a question of you've already got legacy, you've got an infrastructure you've got to run, you don't really want to change it, or it's expensive, or it's hard work. You've got something new, you're going to do it in the modern fashion, the way it's easier, it's more cost-effective and more agile. It's kind of a no-brainer. But it reflects some of that inertia around hybrid cloud, where it can be hard to really completely revamp how you do operations, so everything happens in the seamless single management interface. And then we'll go down the list from there. Internal business systems, on-premise, customer and using systems run on public cloud. This again, a common use case, and now we're getting kind of shading all towards hybrid cloud usage. And go all the way down here. And it says we burst to public clouds or hosted clouds or additional resources are needed. So you've got these use cases, but you've got a strong trend of enterprises that are saying we're moving in this direction. We are going to be able to interoperate. We are going to be able to dynamically move workloads. That is to say, when it's appropriate, with a minimum of fuss, and again through that single pane of glass. And again, across all verticals, all workloads. We've got manufacturing, finance, technology, retail, healthcare. The most important takeaway from this graph, which shows workloads that are considered for hybrid cloud, use cases, is the consistency. There's some blips and blops, there's some ups and downs here, but basically every vertical has essentially the same breakout of which workloads they're thinking about and considering moving. And when I said there were standouts, data backup is right up there at the top for all of them, because this is the primary use for enterprises for cloud, is to be able to sync from one location to another and enable disaster recovery, enable data backup in a way it's never been easier or cheaper. Next after that, database. Again, classic use case. You want to keep your data in one place, but you want to be able to process it somewhere else where it's cheaper or faster or closer to your end target. So those stand out as the initial or early candidates for hybrid cloud, but all the rest of them are going to come along. And really, the takeaway is that you want to be able to have the best execution venue for whatever workload you have. And if you implement hybrid cloud operations, if you implement this model where you can do everything from a single management interface, it just becomes that much easier to pick. So in short, it's here and it's coming, and if you're not considering it, you probably will be very shortly. Some of the benefits are pretty pretty easy to see. It's flexibility in performance, cost, and location. Applications and data can be in optimal environments for performance. Cost can be continually reevaluated. It could be, it's going to run cheaper in Seattle on Tuesday, and it's going to run cheaper in Ashburn on Wednesday, and you'll be able to move your workloads around depending on whether or not that makes sense. It can be put in, it enables new ways to do development and run applications. You can mix distributed and stacked apps. You can mix your legacy infrastructure in with just, applications that can do cool stuff on public clouds if you want. It gives you the potential to increase continuous integration, continuous development, because you can spread your development, production, Q&A environments across whatever makes the most sense, and you can, it makes moving development, moving code updates that much easier across those different lines. It just gives you more flexibility in that regard because you can manage and see all those environments without having to readjust or go to different dashboards or even go to different locations. It gives you a better security model. One of the big problems with cloud computing is that you have to mix and match traditional on-premise legacy infrastructure protection with firewalls and all that stuff, and protection against cloud computing, which is decentralized and has to be monitored in different ways. Once you've got hybrid cloud orchestration as a model in your infrastructure, you can now only have to do it once. It requires adjustment, but you have the ability now to apply a consistent security model across many different heterogeneous environments. It gives you holistic oversight for these applications. It really, it gives you a way to look at everything all at once instead of having to go to different places to look at it. It also helps you deal with things like compliance. If you have to deal with data that has to stay within certain regional locations or is subject to different regulation depending on where it is, you can do that more easily. You can move your data around more easily by using tools that exist out in the market or by enabling, hybrid management. It's better. Overall, it's better. It's an easier way to think about things. It's an easier way to do things. That's kind of the bottom line. That said, it's not without challenges. Security and compliance are the big ones because these are not technological barriers. These are barriers to operations, and these are barriers to modernizing IT organizations in general. Security is one of those things that you either don't mess with, or you rely on somebody else to mess with, or you haven't done properly in the first place. When you look at implementing hybrid cloud, and you look at what essentially is a reorganization of all of your way you do IT operations, security is going to be a headache. Compliance always has to be addressed, especially if you're in a regulated industry, if you're in a regulated jurisdiction, depending on what kind of data you're taking care of. So those, these are the kinds of things that you think about first. It does require planning. It's not push button easy, although as I said before, it's gotten much easier than it was when we first considered this sort of stuff. Complexity comes in everywhere around operations, but also around culture, around planning, around all those different moving parts. The bigger the organization, the older the organization, the more likely you are to have stuff that is just never going to fit into a cloud model. It may be hardware that you rely on, but doesn't have API access, or has machine licensing requirement, you name it. Lack of skills and resources. This is where providers and vendors really come in, is because it's hard to find somebody who's got all the skills to properly administer and properly manage and massage different technologies like VMware and AWS and so on. Lack of experience in doing this holds a lot of enterprises back. They look at it and they say, this looks like a great idea. I don't really want to do it because I haven't done it and things are working right now, so I'm just going to sit on my hands for a little while. That's something eventually you have to overcome because the competitive pressure becomes too much. Legacy infrastructure and operations models, that's really the big one. And the thing you're going to get around is that you have to do this in bits and pieces as things become available. You have public cloud and private cloud, relatively easy. Public cloud and, say, mainframe hybrid integration, not so easy. But these are the challenges you have to address, and they're out there. However, that said, it has gotten a little bit easier, and that's why we're here talking with Pivot 3, because they're going to show what their approach to doing hybrid cloud today looks like. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll turn it over here.
All right. Thanks a lot, Carl, for that. This is Ben Bowles. I run the product team here at Pivot 3, and so I'm happy to be here with everyone to describe and go through kind of in this hybrid cloud world some of the things that we're doing to help our customers simplify and get the most out of their deployments. And so I wanted to run through a couple things about what we see, where we're headed, that type of thing, and then give you some insight into some of the things that we do with our customers, with our software and our deployments, and what they're having success with. And Carl went through a lot of this, in his description of kind of some of the dynamics that are going on and the different things that they're seeing. And one of the things that we would echo is, multiple clouds and customers adopting multiple clouds is, pretty much the norm now. I mean, there's, more and more of customers are deploying things. They have different environments that they're managing, whether it's on-prem or public cloud environments. And so, a lot of what's required as we move forward here from our perspective is some of the things that you see listed here. I mean, some of these areas that we're focused in around bringing automation through intelligence, and so that's one of the things that we'll walk through here. We see where machine learning and being able to optimize the system on a variety of fronts is something that will be required as we go forward here, and then being able to work towards that complete automation of data and application mobility, and that's really what we're aiming for, so that no matter where the application is deployed, it can be moved. The data that goes along with that can be moved as well to get the most out of the system for cost or performance, compliance, security, all the different dimensions that are important for how you run your applications, and being able to provide that software intelligence to be able to do those types of things. And so those are some of the areas that we're focused on, and the different things that we're trying to solve for our customers. There's from what we're doing around our intelligence and automation. I'll walk you through some of the details of things that we're already doing in this area, especially around policy management and prioritization, inferring from what customers tell us about the importance of their workloads, and then making decisions at a system level on their behalf to optimize that. So you go through some of the different items here. We have a strong belief that managing at a cloud scale really requires a very good policy management framework and a software engine behind that to be able to manage things like performance and data protection, security, data placement, all of the different aspects that go along with how you manage your workloads, and being able to do that at policy, so you could have many workloads and that are part of an application or a situation there, and then you apply policies to those, and you can change those policies on the fly, and the system automatically responds to that. Where it says infer, about inferring from what customers tell us their higher priority workloads are versus lower priority workloads, or however they want to describe that to us, and then using that information and through service levels and things of that nature to be able to manage the different aspects. So as an example, if we need to allocate more performance to a higher priority workload, we have a quality of service engine that does that in real time, and so that's all controlled through service levels and policies. Some of the other things that are really important and is around algorithms for artificial intelligence, machine learning, the different things that go into being able to make the best decisions, to learn about what the workloads are doing, both on-prem and in public cloud, and so being able to automatically respond to different situations that might come up and do that on your behalf. And then on the observe, that's really about how do we learn about what customers are doing in the different applications and implementations, and then feed that back through analytics. And so we have a integrated phone home system that if customers permit us, that we get a lot of those metrics and analytics back, and we can turn that back to you as a customer and give you information about here are some best practices around what we're seeing in our install base about how to run these different workloads, that kind of thing. When you look at the description of what we have and where we're headed, we categorize it into this thing called the intelligent hybrid cloud, and it's important for us to recognize that we, as Carl described, hybrid cloud, being able to take advantage of your on-prem and your public cloud environments in a simple to manage, seamless type of way. And then there needs to be a lot of intelligence automation around that, orchestration, those types of things. And so that's what you see when we talk about our intelligence engine. A key part to that, as I already described, was policy management, the policy engine, the quality of service, that type of thing. Orchestration of those workloads and the data movement, both the data and the compute side is key there, and then analytics built in so that we're constantly analyzing how the system is performing, whether the workloads are on-prem or public, and then making recommendations and perhaps automation of data and or workload movement between the different environments. So you see the kind of on the left there, the Pivot 3 private cloud. So we have a hyperconverged software defined product set, and so what a lot of customers do is they deploy that on-prem, and then they have their public cloud environments that they bring into the fold there. And so in that private cloud environment, we do have some capabilities that allow it to work into a existing infrastructure. So presentation of existing storage and or compute resources that can tie into our hyperconverged system is something that we've done for a while, and that's a key part of it, so that it isn't just existing in a vacuum or on an island there. And then having the different capabilities I'll go through here next, and some of the different use cases that allow customers to tie our private cloud environments in with their various public clouds that you see listed there. And so a good example, or some examples of how we're helping customers through our automation and intelligence, really it's about how do we help them achieve their business outcomes. And so what you see listed there on the left are some real examples of how we've helped, these are Pivot 3 customer examples of how we've helped them achieve business outcomes through our software and technology. And so as an example, maximizing physician time with patients, this was a virtual desktop rollout that we helped with, where we were able to cut login times dramatically for their for the doctors, and that was facilitated through our software that's performing the performance and protection and compliance in that particular instance. And then there's the different aspects of the solution that we're orchestrating around storage and hybrid cloud, public cloud for those different situations. And so depending on what the customer's trying to achieve, the business outcome we can bring to bear with our capabilities, to kind of meet what they need to achieve, and then help them with that. And so we have a number of examples of how we've done that, whether it's the physician time one, or rolling out a new store and cutting that down to 2 hours, those types of things. And so that's really what we're driving towards, is using our technology and capabilities in a hybrid cloud environment to achieve those business outcomes, simplify for the business, that kind of thing. So
brings us to our next poll question. Thank you. So please make sure to go ahead and vote when it shows up on your screen. Which feature do you believe is most important for hybrid cloud deployments? Backup and recovery of data in the cloud, disaster recovery in the cloud, data workload migration movement, security and compliance across multiple clouds, or network automation, security, and segmentation?
Okay, thanks, Colleen, for that. I mean, some of the things that we hear from our customers, and I'll go through some of the use cases that we're targeted in. I mean, some of them make a lot of sense and are easier to perhaps get started and digest to get going. And one of the ones we see a lot is, like an offsite backup and recovery type use case. And so, that allows you to kind of get started and get going. Another one that we're starting to see more and more is, being able to migrate workloads to and from public and private cloud, really trying to get to a solution set where it doesn't really matter, the application and the end users don't really care too much about where the application is running, just to make sure that it's going to get what it needs for performance and availability, reliability, all the different aspects that are important. Security is a big one nowadays, and so those are some of the things that we're seeing from our customers that are becoming more and more popular, and how they're deploying our systems integrated in with their public cloud environments. We done there, Colleen? Or okay, thanks. As I mentioned before, there's a few use cases here that we'll walk through, and these are things that we're helping our customers with here today in a hybrid cloud solution. And so the idea here is that we want to simplify, streamline, automate, all the different aspects that go along, and not treat these as completely different environments anymore. And so in this on this slide, you see then listed there around backup and DR as being a pretty popular one these days, workload mobility. And then another one that we're seeing a fair amount of is being able to archive data, tier data, have some intelligence around what data should reside on-prem, what data can be stored in public cloud, and provide a way that is very easy and straightforward, so you don't have to rewrite applications, you don't have to have different skill sets. It all works within the same tools that the customer is used to. And so those are some of the different use cases that were targeted here today. The first one around backup and DR, this is a solution that works right within our software stack. So we have a version of our software. The software is called Acuity, and that we have an Acuity Cloud Edition that runs as an Amazon machine image. And so you have your on-prem hyperconverged stack from Pivot3 that's running the same Acuity software on-prem, and now you're running an instance of that software on Amazon. And so this facilitates the use case around being able to back up your data directly to from an on-prem data center or a remote site into a Amazon cloud environment there. And so the idea here is to provide offsite backup, a second copy of the data. You can also copy the data from Amazon back to an on-prem or a remote site type environment, and so the data movement is facilitated both ways there. The way that it looks from a management perspective, and this is really getting to some of what Carl alluded to earlier around the providing a seamless view or a single pane of glass. And so the on-prem private cloud and the Acuity Cloud Edition that's running on Amazon is all managed through our management console. So it's the same exact software, it's the same management tools, and so you as a customer don't have to learn something new. You're utilizing the same snapshot, clone, replication technology that we have in our private cloud systems, now extending that to Amazon. And so in this slide, you see that we can replicate data to and from cloud and on-prem. And so we're now taking the experience that you have in a private cloud, extending that to public cloud, thus you have your hybrid cloud environment there. The way it gets deployed is an Amazon machine image, so pretty straightforward. If you're familiar with AWS and how to deploy that, you'll be very familiar with what we're doing here. And so basically, you get it up and running. Once you have an IP address assigned to that, then you can go into the software and define it as a replication target and provide some credentials. And so this is how we start to establish the relationship between the on-prem system and the Acuity system running in the cloud. And then really what you're leveraging here is all the technology we have around policy management, data protection, quality of service, that type of thing. And we're extending all those capabilities that we have on-prem now for public cloud. And so doing things with, as I mentioned before, with prioritization and service levels, all the reservation of resources, scheduling. It's integrated with the data protection services are integrated with applications like Windows apps and VMs within VMware, that type of thing. You can apply these policies to multiple volumes or virtual machines, and they are going to control both the local protection as well as the remote protection, and in this case, replication to cloud. And once you go through that, we do this through a cloud replication policy. It's pretty straightforward. Once you have defined your cloud replication target, that's now available as a selection, and you can set up the advanced scheduling to do things like recurrence and retention policies and things of that nature. And so this is meant to be the same as what you do on-prem. Now you're doing it to Amazon is the approach that we've taken. And so this kind of gets to the how do we extend that hybrid cloud management and not require that you have to know a bunch about the different approaches for doing things there. So that kind of covers off the data protection, backup, DR type use cases. The other one that we're seeing a lot from our customers right now is around wanting to have a better solution around workload mobility, and so this is one where we have a lot of intelligence and information metrics about workloads and where they should run, that type of thing. And so the first set of capabilities we have here is to be able to easily and seamlessly be able to migrate a workload from one cloud to the other, whether it's a private cloud to a public cloud, or private to private, or public to public even. So we have capabilities that facilitate being able to migrate workloads, which includes the data, from these different environments back and forth. And so this is something that's becoming more popular. Carl mentioned that a lot of where we're headed, and so just give you a little bit of a view into some of what we're doing here. And so being able to at first provide information about, for performance reasons or availability or reliability or security those type of dimensions, where is it best to run these workloads? And then and the first step that we'll be taking here is more in an advisory role. So, providing that information and being able to say, hey, this is where these workloads should run. And then down the road, we'll get to where it's automated. And so if you would like us to, through our policy engine, we can migrate the workloads on the fly and automate that. And so those are some of the things that we have in place, some of this right now, and then some of the things that we're working on where we're headed there. And then the last use case is around the whole, archiving and tiering and providing a much more intelligent kind of data layer for, what data resides on-prem and what data should go to the cloud. And so this is something that we have capabilities around tiering of data on-prem that can, whether it's RAM, NVMe, flash, SSDs, hard drives, that kind of thing. And that's all controlled through our quality of service engine and data placement policies, that type of thing. And what we're doing here is we're extending that to incorporate the Acuity Cloud Edition. And so there's a single volume presentation on-prem, and then the system is automatically determining, what data should reside on-prem and what data should be pushed out to the cloud. The example we have listed on the slide is pretty simple. It's the colder data being moved out, and then the warmer data being kept on-prem. But there are other algorithms and decisions that the system can make about should it do I just want to present a volume on-prem that's 100% backed by cloud as an example, and so then that would mean that all the data really is on a public cloud, but the presentation is from the application standpoint is localized. And so this allows us to integrate into existing applications without having to change a bunch of stuff. And so the on-prem environment looks pretty much how it is today, but we've extended our storage capability to translate out to public cloud. And then just to quickly summarize, I mentioned before that Pivot 3 we have a set of hyperconverged software-defined offerings, and so we spent a lot of time talking about hybrid cloud and how we can run our software on the public cloud environments. There's different flavors depending on the different use cases. So we have a data center edition that's focused more on those data center type workloads. We have a security and surveillance edition that's focused more in the IoT space and video surveillance workloads. And then the cloud edition, as we've gone through a lot of the details there, and that's an instance of our software that runs on the cloud. And so those are some of the different deployment modes. You can deploy this as software only, or you can. We have appliances as well that customers deploy, and there's a number of different horizontal and vertical solutions and spaces that we do a lot of work in, and so some of them are pretty straightforward and common in the hyperconverged space. Some of the other ones are more emerging and where we're headed, but we're seeing the adoption of hyperconverged and private cloud as certainly growing like crazy for us, and now with hybrid cloud environments coming on, it's a good thing that we're seeing for us as well. And I think that brings me to the end of the presentation there. And so at this point, perhaps if there's any Q&A that's come in, maybe Carl and I can handle that.
Great, thanks, Carl and Ben. It's now time for our Q&A session. As a reminder, simply type in your question in the box below, and we will get to as many as we can. So the first question is for Carl. If I already have SaaS apps up and running, why should I try to use them in a hybrid cloud arrangement?
Well, that's a reasonable question, and the answer is maybe you shouldn't. Maybe your workloads are where they need to be, and your end user utility is where it needs to be. I mean, software as a service has been around since before it was called software as a service, and it's designed to be consumable without, essentially any access whatsoever to the infrastructure that underlies it. It's entirely hands-free, if you will, or tools-free. That being said, most SaaS applications these days, especially large, complex applications like Salesforce or Taleo, are now relatively fully API enabled. So if you want to, there are ways, and there are probably profitable or, well, if not monetarily profitable, then profitable from an efficiency standpoint, ways to look at leveraging the data that you're sending to that SaaS app, look at ways that you can pull out and automate the processes you're doing, with that SaaS application. So instead of having manual data entry or manual records logging, you can build scripts now that'll talk to your SaaS app for you. And when you think about things like that, when you think about the API enablement that goes into these platforms, you can think about treating them as infrastructure under the hood too. There's lots of stuff that you can do with a platform like Salesforce that most people never do. If you look at those capabilities, you look at some of the data analytics processing that they can do. You look at some of the suggestion engines that they have and things like that. You can bake that into your own applications and effectively leverage SaaS platforms, for tools that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get to. You can also use it to do things like verify that the data you're going up there is encrypted, or make sure that you have copies of data that you're sending off to your SaaS provider. So there are things to look at, but honestly, the answer is entirely situational.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Ben. How do the data protection policies tie into Pivot 3's overall policy management engine?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so we touched on the policy engine. It incorporates a number of different things. So data protection is one piece of it. And so the data protection policies control and govern all the data protection features we have, like snapshots, replication, cloning, scheduling, retention policies, that type of thing. But it's one aspect of our policy engine. There's the other pieces are around performance, quality of service. So we have policies for meeting, I/O and throughput and latency objectives. We have the prioritization that goes along with the SLAs. So built into the policy management is the concept of mission critical, business critical, and non-critical service levels. And so not only is there targets for performance and protection, but they're governed by an SLA framework. And so those are some of the things that work along with the data protection policy management. And then lastly, all the data placement is controlled through that policy framework, policy engine. And so the idea there is to meet a particular SLA, the data needs to reside on the right media, the right location. So we have, whether it's in NVMe flash or SSDs or hard drives, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, all that is factored into the policy engine and how to meet those SLAs.
Can I jump in here for a sec? Because I think this is a great example of kind of the topic of the webinar here today. If you're a smart IT person and you get tasked with something like policy governance or managing policy across a number of different infrastructure environments, you could almost certainly build a framework that would work satisfactorily by yourself. However, it's a lot of heavy lifting, and at the end of the day, it's not terribly remunerative. And so the point is that Pivot 3, along with other hybrid cloud orchestrators and managers, has already done this. So this is kind of how this has been simplified, how this has been made easy. Most of the hard questions in hybrid cloud management have been answered. So it's not necessary to do everything by your own bootstraps, and that's kind of the point. So you look at something like this and you say, oh, well, someone's already clearly put thought into policy automation, and they've given it to me wrapped up in a bow. And that's kind of why why this trend is accelerating, is because there are so many of those answers out there for the questions that don't go away.
Thanks for adding to that, Carl.
Sure.
Next question is for Ben. What is the granularity that the cloud replication policies can be set to?
Yeah, a good question. So the policies are assigned to the volumes that make up a virtual machine is really how it's done. So there's a number of different ways that you can kind of set it up and slice it. I mentioned application level intelligence, VM level intelligence. So even if you have multiple virtual machines on the same volume or data store, if you want to use the VMware vernacular there, we manage that at a virtual machine level, at an application level. So we have making sure that the data is in the proper state when we create the recovery points. That type of thing is all done at a application level granularity. So it's flexible enough that depending on how you deploy your applications and your virtual machines onto the Pivot 3 system, it can adapt to what the customer approach is there. And so there's different levels of granularity would really be the right answer to that question.
Great, thank you. And for Carl, how do you do cost optimization on existing infrastructure as well as on AWS if using this platform?
That question might actually be better addressed to Ben. There's any number of ways to do cost optimization on public cloud right now. On private cloud or even on legacy infrastructure, the answer is generally still a spreadsheet, which isn't always the happiest thing to hear. But if, Ben, you have any input on what you guys do for cost optimization or cost monitoring, that would be interesting to hear.
So there's a couple different views that we have on that. One of the things that we in an on-prem environment, in a hybrid cloud, that we see pretty dramatic cost optimization that customers will get over what they're doing today. And that's really just goes to the compute and storage efficiencies that we're able to drive out of our on-prem systems. We have a number of examples where we're able to consolidate and get more out of what the customer's doing versus where they're at now. There's a number of metrics and analytics that we have built into our software to so that they can see kind of what they're getting from a performance and an SLA management, both performance and capacity growth, being able to understand what the trends are around that. And then as far as hybrid cloud and where to best run workloads, that type of thing, that's when you get into looking at is this workload better to run in the on-prem private environment, or should I look at running it in a public cloud environment? And so there are some of the things that we're doing around providing the information to be able to make those determinations to customers. And then it really comes down to looking at what the options are, and what many times the cost element is just one of the decision factors that goes into where that workload should run, but we provide that information to them.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, and this will be our last question for today, and I believe this one is for Ben. Can the workload migration you have migrate workloads between public clouds, or just Pivot 3 on-prem to a single public cloud?
The capability is very flexible, so it can think of any cloud or multi-cloud environment. You could have multiple private cloud environments. You can use the capability even for existing legacy migrations from a legacy system to a Pivot 3 system on-prem, or a legacy system up to a public cloud, or you can use the capabilities that we have to migrate between public cloud and private clouds and back and forth. So it's pretty flexible, and it can go between different environments. So whether it's Amazon or Google or Azure or on-prem Pivot 3, that supports all of those.
All right, thanks so much for answering those questions, Carl and Ben. That concludes today's webcast. As a reminder, the on-demand replay will be available on Bright Talk soon. On behalf of Pivot 3 and 451 Research, thank you so much for attending, and have a great day.